Alright, so we have a big-name free agent cornerback who clearly wants to come to Philly. Great news on the Eagles' cap space, and why DeVonta Smith could be getting extended soon. Plus, Lane Johnson voiced his opinion on who the Eagles should draft as his replacement, with the Birds already scheduling a visit, and we get you ready for all the NFL Combine happenings this week and which players to keep an eye on. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? Do me a favor, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe because we are very close to 47,000. Which, speaking of you subscribers, congrats to Anthony McCants for winning the AJ Brown jersey giveaway during the live stream Friday. And kudos to Swole Batman for standing up to WIP in the first place.
I'm the person who stands up to the bully. I'll have no problem. I want to be here. It's as simple as that. I got a couple questions for you guys though.
For sure.
What's the deal? What's the deal? Like, you guys supposed to be supporting Philly, but you know it don't turn out to be that. You know what I'm saying? Like, why make up so many rumors? You know what I'm saying? Like, because most of the rumors don't even be real rumors. These are rumors that you guys are making up and everybody run with. Like, so what's the deal? Like, I don't got nothing to get out of my chest, man. I just want to let Philly know I love them, and everybody who's making up rumors. Hey, man, you need to find another job, man.
I couldn't agree with AJ more and absolutely love the fact that he wants to stay in Philly, not that he was ever going to leave in the first place. Now, the other receiver I think we all want to see an extension get done is DeVonta Smith, and he's been trending in that direction this offseason, but seems even more likely after the NFL's announcement that the salary cap shot up to $255.4 million, an increase of over $30 million from last season.
My God, you're rich.
Sure, kind of, although so is every other team. However, the speculation is that could be a good thing for the hopes of getting a Haason Reddick extension done, and we'll discuss that a little later in the video. But the facts are that the Eagles' cap number is now $32 million, and assuming the Birds pull off what ESPN calls a bold move, even though it's really not, and cut Kevin Byard, that'd get the cap space up to $45 million. Obviously, there's several positions we need to fill, but I'm wondering if Howie Roseman might make a big splash like Tim McManus wrote a week ago when he suggested Philly sign Kansas City cornerback Ljarius Sneed.
I like it a lot.
Okay, well, it gets better, since Sneed actually took to his Instagram to post this cryptic, but maybe not so cryptic post using an Eagles emoji while showing a pic of him flying like an eagle. And again, I've talked about him more than a couple times, but Sneed is a dude I'd definitely be okay spending a lot of money on, because obviously he plays with a ton of physicality and intensity, and at 27, maybe you can get him for something like a 3-year deal and $50 million, at least according to SpotTrack. Although I hear you, he led the league in penalties, and you may have to pay higher than that with all the inflation, so maybe he's not worth it. Or another option is all-pro cornerback Xavier Howard. After Miami released the 4-time Pro Bowler with a 30-year-old not having the best season, but this guy's a baller. I mean, y'all already know that for those that have watched his game, but if you haven't, then just trust me, because Xavier and I graduated the same year from Baylor, and Thomas and I used to cover him back for the student newspaper. Man, that was a long time ago. But seriously, I'm telling you, X is a competitor. Plus, anything's better than James Bradberry, but given his age and the fact that he just got cut, you might be able to swoop in and bring him in on a cheaper deal. What do y'all think? Would you prefer Sneed or X? Okay, as much as I have a personal connection with Xavier, and I definitely think he can still be good, I'm just not sure it's the best fit. After Jalen Ramsey called out Vic Fangio for not utilizing his and Howard's skill set the best, and saying that he'll never forgive the DC for that. Now, X hasn't said anything, so who knows if he has beef with Fangio, but it does make sense considering Drew Rosenhaus's report that several defensive players didn't care for the DC and were happy to see him go. Yet I think we're going to be fine, we just got to make sure to get the right guys on the roster, which is why personally, if it's not Sneed or Peck Jalen Johnson, I'd rather we draft a cornerback, and specifically Toledo's Quinyon Mitchell, since he plays the style that suits Fangio's scheme, and has been reported that he can run a 4.3 40, plus he's just a dominant ball hawk. Although let's say that you don't get him, there's still several options that make sense at corner, because Daniel Jeremiah said this is one of the deepest cornerback classes he's seen. However, if you want to talk about the other side of the ball, the Eagles officially scheduled a top 30 visit with Oklahoma right tackle Tyler Guyton, with the 6'7", 330-pound lane paver being someone that Lane Johnson calls a freakazoid, and according to the Inquirer, would be his top pick if the Eagles are pursuing O-lineman in the draft, since Lane believes Guyton moves better than anyone in the draft. Of course, Guyton's only played 15 games at the position and admitted he's still pretty raw, evidenced by at least a couple reps at the Senior Bowl. By the way, Lane did also mention to Stout that JC Latham from Alabama could be a good option, and he said he'd kind of move him into right guard and eventually, after a couple years, move him back out to right tackle with the versatility. So Guyton doesn't have that, so it could be one or the other. Either way, as much as we may want the Birds to take a defensive player in the first round, I wouldn't sleep on the idea of Philly going with offensive linemen based on more than a couple reports, which feels like a great time to mention the sponsor of today's video, Bear Mattress. And not gonna lie, I haven't gotten much sleep recently with the newborn, but with Bear's premium fiberglass-free mattress customized to my preferences, at least I'm getting some quality sleep. And they're currently running their President's Day sale, so head to bearmattress.com/Philly special to get a higher discount than what's being offered on site. Look, we've had ours for nearly a month, and I've got to say, this is the first time I've ever purchased a mattress online, but I've noticed a significant difference in my sleep. Because Bear knows that everybody has different preferences in sleep positions, which is why they've made a sleep quiz that will help remove all the guesswork. And that's what me and my wife did. I'm more of a side sleeper who likes a softer mattress, while my wife sleeps on her back and prefers a medium firmness. Where based on our results, Bear matches up with an elite hybrid, so we both got what we wanted. And then, after placing the order, they shipped the mattress directly to our front door, where we were able to easily unroll and set up our new one with the help of our girls. And if you sleep hot like me, or you just started late in the season with the way the Eagles were playing, you're in luck, because Bear's sleep recovery technology uses a Celliant-powered fabric to help you stay cool throughout the night. And all of Bear's mattresses are Green Guard Gold certified, Certi Pure US certified, and EcoFlex fiberglass free. Trust me, it's as safe and reliable as running the tush push behind Jason Kelce on 3rd and 1. The best part about all of this is that Bear delivers your mattress right to your front door with free shipping in the US. And hey, I get it. If it makes you nervous to buy something you haven't tried, I felt the exact same way. But what sold me was Bear has a 120-night sleep trial, basically 3 months to make sure you love it or your money back. They also have a lifetime warranty, and they offer financing as well as flexible payment plans. I'm telling you, I may not be getting a lot of sleep these days, but I can't beat the quality. I love my Bear mattress, and I think you would too. So if you're looking to upgrade your sleep, head to bearmattress.com/Philly special and use code Philly special to get 40% off your Bear mattress, plus $400 in sleep accessories. FYI, this is higher than what's being offered on site, so check it out while you can. Okay, but there's several dudes you can't be sleeping on at the Combine this week, with defensive linemen and linebackers starting Thursday, followed by defensive backs and tight ends Friday, and then quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs Saturday, with the Combine wrapping up with offensive linemen on Sunday. Which is why I caught up with Pro Football Network's NFL analyst Anthony DiBona to talk about draft visits, sleepers, and players to keep an eye on for the Eagles. The Combine coming up right around the corner, and we have I guess, kind of breaking news. Jake Rabati, shout out to Jake, who had reported, I think, first of the Eagles have scheduled a top 30 visit with Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma. Curious to get your takeaways on just the schedule in general, right? I mean, it's the first one I think that we've seen so far. We're going to see several others eventually, but to get that schedule already, as well as why is that important, or why should people be taking a look really closely in particular at what top 30 visits come out?
So Tyler Guyton is an obvious fit for the Eagles. I mean, the connection to Lane Johnson, he went to Oklahoma, so it's kind of a similar prospect coming out too, because Guyton should test pretty well athletically, and people might not think he's going to be ready right from day one, but I mean, that would be kind of the perfect situation for Philadelphia, where he can kind of sit for a year or 2 or 3, whatever the case might be. So, I mean, I've personally talked about him as a target for the Eagles at 22. I said it months ago, if I had to guess, that he would be one of their targets. And I mean, for the Eagles in particular, top 30 visits are huge, because over the years, we've seen them be obvious indicators of interest. Some teams use them as more, because they know a lot of those reports are going to go public, because it's the most notable type of pre-draft visit that you could have. So sometimes they'll bring in a guy just to throw off another team and make them think they're interested. But as far as the Eagles go, it's always been a clear sign of interest. I mean, over the years, they've brought in a lot of their first or second round picks for top 30 visits. So, I mean, and it's the main reason that it's important is not only are you bringing the guy in your building, but now you're allowed to actually have your own doctors and trainers take a look at him. So that's huge. You're not just relying on the generic medical information that you receive from either the school or the Combine or whatever the case might be. So having your own coaches, your own staff, being able to work with them for basically an entire day is really important. And obviously it's notable that Guyton is the first name to come out regarding the Eagles.
The reaction's going to be all over the place. And again, like we're talking about, this is the first one reported. There's going to be a number of visits that come out of the top 30 visits. That's why they're the top 30 visits. But within that space, you talk about Lane Johnson has been vocal about the support of Tyler Guyton. Tyler Guyton has even said that he views Lane as kind of a big brother of sorts and his mentor. So they have hung out and spent some time together. There's the thought of, do you take a guy to become Lane's replacement? And I don't know, maybe in that instance, is there a better option than a guy that Lane kind of speaks up for and thinks has some really good game there? Now, I know that from your big board, he was the 5th offensive tackle listed. So there's some other options that you see on that spot. But if, and I know we're playing the hypothetical game, that's kind of where we're at these days. If he were to be taken at 22, is that a reach? Is that a okay scenario where you'd see possibly 22 being, I guess a good draft selection for Guyton? Is that a little bit high?
I personally think it'd be totally fine. Like I said, I feel like after the first 2 offensive tackles with Alt and the guy from Penn State, I feel like you can kind of group those other guys together. People kind of have them all over the place. Obviously, athletic testing or how teams view their individual schemes is going to play a factor. So that's going to be interesting. But I feel like you said, with Lane Johnson, there's a clear connection with Tyler Guyton. And we've seen the Eagles, they basically allow Jason Kelce to handpick Cam Jurgens. So we've seen them kind of allow their veterans to almost pick their replacement. So, I mean, it wouldn't be crazy to see it happen. I feel like Guyton is a capable player and he should be picked around that 20 range. So, I mean, if it's 22 or 26 or 28, he's probably going to be a first-round pick. So maybe it might not receive the greatest grade, but everybody said Patrick Mahomes was a terrible pick when he was drafted. So you can't always go with those immediate reactions. You got to give these guys more than just 1 year, more than 2 years. It takes time, especially an offensive tackle being drafted to Philadelphia who won't play right away. So I think it would be a perfectly fine pick at 22.
It's hard to have the patience at times, and we know just from even recent drafts or past drafts like you're referencing, they're a bust, or oh my gosh, this guy's a home run. It's just, you got to take some time, and it's hard to do. But as we're looking at this, I would say my personal preference, and it feels like the vast majority of Eagles fans and comments that I get, and really just everywhere over Twitter, is take a defensive player at 22. Like, we saw the holes that this team has. We know that there's a lot of options out there. Where would be, in your mind, if we're going defense? I know you have a great breakdown. Again, I've got the link in the description too to check it out on Pro Football Network, all of your content. But within your big board, talking about the positions there for the defensive side of the ball, what's in your mind a really good option for the Eagles to go with on defense?
Well, I feel like cornerback in this year is stacked. So people have been begging the Eagles to kind of bring that young new face in that can be a pillar on their defense for years to come, because obviously James Bradbury is not the answer. Darius Slay, he played well last season, but people still weren't satisfied with how he was acting off the field, or whatever the case might be. So, and obviously he's up there in age as well. So, Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, those guys showed promise, but they're not the caliber of player that the Eagles could land in this draft with a player such as Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, or there's several other names. Quinyon Mitchell is someone that's the number 1 cornerback on my board. People might think I'm crazy, but I think he's going to test really well. He's probably going to run in the 4.3s. He's a super physical cornerback, which I personally love and value highly when I evaluate defensive backs. Because as you saw with the Eagles last season, once runners got to the outside to their cornerbacks, there was a lot of missed tackles. And you wouldn't really have to worry about that with a player like Mitchell. So that's something that I value highly, and I think he would be a home run for them at 22.
I love Quinyon Mitchell. That's I'm right there with you. Even going back to the Senior Bowl, whenever he was talking, he got interviewed and asked, who does he watch his game or kind of mimic and things like that. And Darius Slay was one of the first ones that he mentioned. So, it's like, hey, if you go and get to play with Slay, learn from him. Not a bad thing necessarily, but I like it too. It's you talk about, they're all competitive because you get to this level, you have competitive drive, but there's a difference, and we've seen from players that you have to either kind of encourage or motivate get to that level versus I'm here, I'm competitive, and this dude's a gamer, and I love seeing that from him so far. I'm curious, like you mentioned there, to see what he actually runs in the tests in the combine, but if he goes 4.3, do you see? I don't even know if he makes it to 22 really, because like you talked about, he's number 1 on your board. Is there a chance where you see maybe Howie trading up in this draft? And if so, how high do you think he might trade up for a selection? Let's say again, Quinyon Mitchell as that scenario.
Well, I think considering how stacked the cornerback class is, I think I have 5 or 6 cornerbacks graded in the first round. I feel like this is kind of the draft where everybody's going to be trying to move back, because there is so much value in that second and third round range, or even the end of the first round. So I feel like that would be more of the play instead of trying to trade up. But then again, we've also seen Howie Roseman kind of zig when everybody zags. So if everybody is trying to move back, he might take advantage of that and move up a couple spots and really secure who he likes. I mean, but it'll be interesting because I have Mitchell as my number one cornerback and then Cooper DeJean as my number two. And Cooper DeJean's not going to test at the combine, even though he was expected to test out of this world. So everybody knows he's kind of a freakish athlete. People are already trying to move him to safety, but I feel like you should give him the shot at cornerback first and see how that goes. Because I think his ceiling or his floor is probably going to be a Pro Bowl caliber safety. So, I mean, like if that's the worst case scenario, then he would be a great pick as well. But as far as trading up or down, I think trading down would be the move because, like you said, there's just plenty of talent at cornerback. And Ennis Rackstraw Jr. is another one that I really like. He's another guy what's kind of like Mitchell where he's feisty. He's going to talk a lot. Almost Jalen Mills in a way where he's going to talk trash even when he shouldn't talk trash. But it's just, I'd rather, like you said, have to rein a guy in and take that fire and passion out of them than try and make them care about football or make them care about making plays on the field. So he's another one that I really like as a potential trade back option.
Especially after what we saw this last season. I'm with you. You have that fire, have that energy. Even Daniel Jeremiah, you're talking about the depth that they have in the draft. I think he said there's like 15 guys that he sees within the first 3 rounds that could potentially be taken. I mean, there's that much depth at the corner position. So I don't mind it. You trade back, you get a little bit more draft selections there. But to your point, Howie's always trying to be ahead of the curve. Does he do something different that most of the league does not? We'll see. On the flip side of that token, linebacker has been one of those where, there's a considerable amount of criticism. And we take a look at successful teams playing late into the season in NFC Championship, AFC Championship, Super Bowl. Linebackers have played a part. And maybe more so, or possibly it's just the fact that, Howie's decided to continue to not really invest too much in that position, that we're feeling it more so. But talk about linebacker here. Is there a option? I know that you have Edgerrin Cooper as the top linebacker on your big board. I love him for a number of reasons, but is it impossible to think that Howie would go after a linebacker like an Edgerrin Cooper? And why would that be a good move, though, if he were to do that?
I think Edgerrin Cooper's another player that's going to test really well. I mean, his speed shows up on tape. He has great size. He has good length. His sideline-to-sideline speed is great. He had 8 sacks as an off-ball linebacker, which is just absurd because he wasn't even primarily rushing the passer. So that just shows you his potential as a blitzer, which Vic Fangio has used here and there in the past. So, I mean, he's clearly the best linebacker in the draft to me. People might say he's not a first-round caliber prospect, but I think the combine might cement him as such. So that wouldn't surprise me. I think at 22 would be a great pick. But like you said, it's just a matter of Howie Roseman actually valuing the linebackers that highly. But then again, we saw in the Super Bowl and the postseason altogether how valuable linebacker play is and how important it is to invest in that position. So, I mean, you see all these teams kind of probably going to try and imitate those teams now, and maybe we'll see Howie Roseman try and overcompensate for his lack of investing in the position over the past couple of years. We've seen him do that before when the Eagles had the issues with cornerback and then he made the trade for Slay and whatnot. So we don't know if it's going to be a trade, if it's going to be a free agent signing, or if it's going to be in the draft. But, I mean, there's plenty of prospects in the draft. Peyton Wilson from North Carolina State is a player that I personally love. The only issue is he has some injury history, so his medical is obviously going to be huge, which we obviously as the public won't have access to. So, and then everybody's favorite for the target for the Eagles is Jeremiah Trotter Jr. because of the name. But the concern about him is his size. He's another smaller linebacker, kind of like Nakobe Dean. I think he's a significantly better prospect. I have him as a second round grade, and he would fit at 50 or 53 for the Eagles. But the Eagles will have their choice of plenty of linebackers in this draft. It's it's more of a top-heavy class. I wouldn't say it's a deep class, but there is going to be talent there if they want to invest a first, second, or third round pick at the position.
You talk about linebackers there. I'll put you on the spot. I know it's a hypothetical, but do you feel like it's more likely that Howie were to make a splash in free agency for a linebacker or draft higher? I'm not saying necessarily like a first round, but let's say a second round selection on linebacker, because everyone's saying, and rightfully so, maybe because you see the free agents that are out there, and we can get into the cap in a second. But Patrick Queen, there's a Azeez Al-Shire, there's kind of higher tier and then maybe mid tier options in free agency, but even some of those still would feel less likely for a Howie Roseman type of move to make. What do you feel is more reasonable, I guess, or realistic? Is Howie going the draft option and drafting high there, or a free agent acquisition with linebacker?
It might surprise you, but I feel like we will see them invest a bit of money at linebacker in free agency. I don't think they're going to go for, say, Patrick Queen necessarily, but a lot of that next tier is a lot of guys that their current coaching staff has ties to. I mean, Josie Jewell and Andrew Van Ginkel played for Vic Fangio. I know Van Ginkel is a player we've talked about before. He's more of an edge outside guy, but he has played inside linebacker in the past here and there. Azeez Al-Shaair, as you mentioned, he has a tie to their literal new linebacker coach in Bobby King. He was with him in Tennessee last season. So that's an obvious fit. Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner, who were in Seattle last season, obviously have ties to Clint Hurt, who's now in Philadelphia. So, I mean, there's tons of relationships there that were already existed. And I feel like we've seen Howie Roseman overcompensate in the past and kind of adjust when he realizes he kind of screwed up. So I think that's something we might see him do in free agency, especially with the rise in cap space. That'll help as well. And I just feel like the Eagles can move money around and really make an investment early in the offseason because sure, they can rely on landing a guy in the draft, but there's no guarantee there. At least in the free agency, you can know you locked in, say, at least one starter early, a high caliber player, and then you could address the other spot, whether you think it's Nakobe Dean or if you want to bring in competition through the draft or a lower end free agent signing. I think it'll be important for them to lock up that first linebacker early in the offseason.
I'm hopeful we get it. I'm with you in that, yes, there's a lot of importance there. Lots of spots, though, in general. We know that linebacker, safety, corner, probably need some depth on D-line. Like the list is endless, and it's a little bit of an anxious spot to be in, but it's also exciting because, again, we've got the combine coming up here, taking a look at guys. The thing that I love the most, and I'm sure that pretty much everyone enjoys it, is, hey, you're sitting there and like, man, what's this guy going to run for the 40, right? What's this guy going to do for the bench press? And you go to look at some of the other actual positional drills that they're going to do. But it feels like coming into this draft, and I think you had a good tweet about this or a follow-up from the athletic scores, is that Howie Roseman has seemed to, I don't know, maybe make a slight adjustment, not a drastic one, but a slight adjustment, especially after the Jalen Reagor pick and less of an athletic score. Not that means everything and that athletes are the only, guys that should be drafted high, because you could make a ton of other counter arguments to that. However, he has valued, if you take a look at the past drafts, players that have really high athletic scores. And so you mentioned a second ago the Cooper DeJean, even though we won't get the testing there, it's almost a given what people know is he's going to be a crazy athlete. But there's a lot of others out there too. Is there anyone in particular that stands out from either the positions we've been mentioning or, safety, D-line players, anyone there that you think can kind of significantly help themselves when it comes to the testing and that Eagles fans should be keeping an eye out on this coming week?
Well, I mentioned him before, but Quinyon Mitchell, I think, is really going to put up some crazy numbers. There were reports that he ran a 4.3 40, I think, last offseason. So, I mean, I'm sure he's probably going to put up some crazy jump numbers as well. So I feel like he can really cement himself as arguably the top cornerback in this class. Like I said, I already have him there, but I think we'll see more people kind of lock him in as that first round consensus guy soon after a big performance at the Combine. Darius Robinson, edge rusher from Missouri, I feel like he had a really strong Senior Bowl. There's a site, I forget the name, where it kind of puts out a graph that shows where players are mocked and where they're trending. A couple months ago or a month ago, Darius Robinson was considered like a third-round pick, fourth-round pick. After the Senior Bowl, now he's like an early second-round pick, late first. And I think after the Combine, we might see him in the top 20 because he has great size. He performed well on the field, and now I think he's going to showcase his athleticism as well at the Combine. So I think he's just going to continue his rise. And then for I guess, lesser-known prospects, Johnny Wilson from Florida State. He's a receiver. He's 6'7", 240, 230, around that. Some people think he'll be a tight end at the next level, but he reached almost 21 miles per hour during a game. So I feel like he might put up a shockingly fast time. It's just a matter of where you're going to play him at the next level. But a guy with that size and potentially that speed is just, you kind of just get him out there and figure it out. So he's one to watch. Oregon edge rusher Brandon Dorlus is another one that I think he reached 21 or 22 miles per hour on the field as well. So just another freakishly athletic edge rusher to watch for, especially depending on what the Eagles do with Haason Reddick. And then one of my personal favorite prospects in the draft is Louisville running back Jawar Jordan. He put up some ridiculous numbers at certain times. His usage was kind of inconsistent because Louisville had kind of a mix in the backfield, but he reminded me a lot of Keaton Mitchell last year's draft, where he just has game-breaking speed, where you kind of just get him the ball somehow and then just let him go to work because he's a threat to score on basically any play. Right now, he's projected as a day 3 running back. Some people have him going undrafted, but I feel like he's probably going to run in the 4.3s. That might boost his stock a little bit. And then you just saw what Keaton Mitchell did last season for the Ravens before he went down. So I feel like those explosive running backs that can just change the game in any play, which is kind of why I have Bucky Irving as my number 1 running back, is because you just can't teach that kind of stuff. And that speed is hard to find. And when it's on the field, the defense has to account for it. So I'm excited to see what all of those players do with the combine.
You're right on with the running back. It feels a little bit different naturally, going into this one versus last year whenever it was, Bijan draft 5, all the talk of, hey, where's Bijan going to go? Could Philly get him? Is there interest? He came for a visit and everything like that. Jahmyr Gibbs, they were just kind of givens with those types of caliber running backs, and then it's everybody else. This season, maybe not quite as much. I agree with you, and it feels like the vast majority of the consensus is maybe a Bucky Irving, at least like consistent to be up there in terms of running backs. But then there's a lot of other guys being put at different spots. Curious to get your take on, you didn't mention him yet, but Dylan Laube, is that how I say his last name? I've heard a couple different,
Yep.
I think it's, okay, so.
Laube.
Okay, so obviously being at the Senior Bowl, heard some interviews. The dude is like a Swiss Army knife. I mean, there's so many things that you could do with him. Is he a possibility for Philly, and why would he be such a great fit in this offense?
Well, I just feel like the Eagles running back room right now, I feel like you have Kenneth Gainwell, who people have their opinions about, but he's basically the only one that's guaranteed a spot on the roster next season. So I feel like a player like Laube, where he can basically do everything. He can catch the ball. He can run the ball. He can return. He had 4 touchdown returns in his career. And he had a game, like I believe it was against Central Michigan, where he had over 300 total yards just by himself. So, I mean, the guy is just an absolute animal. He said all the right things at the Senior Bowl. He talked about potentially playing in Philadelphia and how much he would love the fan base there and whatnot. So, I mean, he's kind of a guy. When I took my notes when I was watching him, I said he runs like Ray Rice and he catches the ball like Danny Woodhead. So, I mean, like, he's just a kind of a rare guy. I know he's a small school. He'll be knocked for that. But it's just with his receiving ability, especially in today's game, you see what the 49ers did with Christian McCaffrey, and you just see receiving running backs all throughout the league kind of going to the next level. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, like you mentioned, the top 2 guys last season. But, I mean, a guy like him is someone that the Eagles can really just bring in and kind of just use him however they see fit. I mean, we've seen Kellen Moore use running backs in interesting ways in the past. And I feel like considering the Eagles don't have a wide receiver 3 really on their roster yet, that consistent guy that they could just throw in the slot and rely on outside of DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown, I feel like a player like Dylan Laube would be able to kind of do it all for them, where whether he's in the backfield or he's in the slot, he even lined up outside. In that same game that I mentioned, he had 295 receiving yards, I believe, on like 12 receptions. It's just the potential is absurd, and I feel like for probably an early day 3 pick, I feel like the risk is worth it.
I'm telling you, you mentioned, I mean, I'm not opposed to a whole Ray Rice with a Danny Woodhead. So you mentioned both that, the combination, the ability he has. Granted, it's where he might be, but you're right. I mean, just with a Kenny Gainwell, and then who knows who else we're going to have. Like there is the Ty Davis Price, like we're talking about, and the Lou Nichols, and it's like, okay, there's some depth there, but there's things that'll happen over the course of free agency and the draft. I think that'll be interesting to see and follow along those lines. Also, I guess talking about backups, and there's been speculation and people talking about, hey, I get it, Howie Roseman, the Eagles quarterback factory. Do the Eagles go with a quarterback in the draft? It feels like they think highly of Tanner McKee. I don't know how highly. Is he that QB2, or is there some competition that you bring in? Spencer Rattler's been thrown in there as a possibility just because of the connection with Jalen Hurts, and hey, he's kind of a wild card, maybe not. I think I saw you had him at 3rd round grade, maybe. Is that I don't know, is that realistic? Where do you see possibilities of the Eagles going, or do they even draft a quarterback, I guess relatively high in this draft in that sense?
Well, I think Rattler, like you said, he has the relationship with Hurts, but I just think it would be too much of a controversy to bring in kind of like a day 2 or even early day 3 guy. A guy that I have my eyes on in particular for the Eagles would be Joe Milton. I feel like he's raw, but he has just absurd arm talent. He could probably throw like 70, 80 yards. It's just, he has all the potential, but obviously he's a developmental prospect. So, I mean, targeting him with a later pick in round 5 or so would make sense to me. But it's just what you have to worry about is obviously people are already questioning Jalen Hurts, and you don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers by bringing in a big name there. So I've seen people mention Cooper Rush as a potential target in free agency, because of his relationship with Kellen Moore. So, I mean, something like that would probably make more sense, where it's kind of a guy that is clearly the backup. He's not pushing anybody for anything. You can kind of still bring along Tanner McKee as that third quarterback who could potentially be the backup behind ahead of Cooper Rush. So I feel like that would be a bit of a safer environment to have. But I wouldn't mind bringing Joe Milton and going with two young guys behind Jalen Hurts. It's all just going to come down to what they think about McKee and his development last season.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Again, I don't think that for one, I don't necessarily want to, I shouldn't say waste, but because of how Jalen Hurts turned out, but I don't want to really waste the capital on Jalen on a quarterback in the terms of what the needs that we have on this group, and really, like I'm saying, spend on defense. I'm going to be not like terribly upset, but I'm going to be a little bit disappointed if we don't go with defense at 22 or wherever we pick first. If we trade back, whoever our first selection is, if it's not defense, I'll be a little bit upset. Now, who knows? Things may change because of free agency, and let's get into that too with the cap space. The cap has skyrocketed. It's $255.4 million. It's a 13.6% increase. It's great. There's money everywhere, right? So every team gets it. It affects every team. It's not like it's just the Eagles. However, maybe for free agency play, it doesn't help you as much because, again, every team has benefited from it. But when you talk about extensions, you have a little bit more control because those players, I guess the ones that are not going to be free agents, such as a Haason Reddick, you have a little bit of a better chance. All right, we have some more money to work with. Now, negotiations, the flip side of that argument is, well, the cap just got higher, so I want more money because, it just makes sense that way. But do you see this as being any sort of benefit to a Haason Reddick? Has it changed your stance? I know before you're leaning towards probably unlikely that Haason Reddick gets or remains in Philly, or that you would sign him to a big deal in a sense. Do you think that changes the Eagles' stance? Is there a better likelihood of Haason, maybe hanging around here in Philly?
I think the bumping in salary cap could certainly help because extending Haason Reddick has always made the most sense financially for the Eagles. It was just a matter of if they could come to an agreement on a deal. So, we're still waiting to see what those other teams said to Haason Reddick, whatever it was, how much money they would offer, or what compensation they would want from the Eagles, or if they would be willing to rework his contract, whatever the case might be. So, that always made the most sense financially, was him sticking around in Philadelphia, signing an extension, which would probably lower his cap number this season by 11 or 12 million, which would give the Eagles even more money to operate with. So, that is the obvious choice for both sides. It's just a matter of if Reddick wants to stay in Philadelphia for whatever they're willing to pay him. If obviously they're not offering him enough money, then all of this means nothing and he'll just end up going wherever he's going. So, if they can't come to terms, then the Eagles should just move on and get whatever they can for him in a trade, which obviously might not be ideal for them. But if that's just where they're going, it's better than letting him walk for nothing than getting a compensatory pick in the future. So, that's something they have to wait for. Getting something in the draft potentially this year would obviously be the better road in that regard. So, it seems like Haason Reddick wants to stay. It makes the most sense financially for him to stay and sign an extension, but it's just a matter of what's out there for him.
Yeah, I'm hopeful, and I've remained hopeful. I think that, again, to your point, I think everyone wants to see Haason be here. He's an Eagle. He's a native of Philly. Just the vibes that he gives around the team, and obviously that veteran leadership that you don't have as much, or probably won't. It feels like, Fletch may not be coming back. BG probably, but it's his for sure last season if he does. Who knows about Kelce? Lane, in a couple years, most likely the feeling is that he would be retiring. So, you're talking about drafting a replacement in a Tyler Guyton maybe. But yeah, if Haas does not return, and you mentioned him a second ago, and we've talked about him a couple different times, but Van Ginkel seems like the most obvious, signing that'll happen at that point. If Haason does not return, the connection with Vic Fangio, and then you talking about too with in the draft situation, but Darius Robinson, because he was torching people in the Senior Bowl. Heck, I think Tyler Guyton maybe got beat on a couple reps by Darius Robinson pretty badly. But you can solve it in a couple different ways. Is there any chance, as far as defensive line, Nolan Smith continues to be brought up, and there is potential there. However, he didn't get a whole lot of reps. do you see Fangio with his scheme being able to utilize Nolan's skill set better? Because we know he likes the faster, athletic linebackers in that sense. Do you think that it benefits him from that side? And maybe, I guess that's regardless of if Haason goes, but if Haason goes, there's more reps naturally. So how do you think Nolan benefits from that?
Well, I think Nolan Smith, I thought the world of him last season, especially another, like I said, with the athletic testing and just what he put on the field. It made sense of that pick because they knew what they were facing this season with Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat heading into the final year of their contracts. So they kind of got ahead of themselves. Howie Roseman drafts a year in advance once again. So, I mean, I think he's a great fit for Vic Fangio's system. He could probably play a similar role to what Andrew Van Ginkel did for Fangio in Miami, where he was, I mean, ideally you don't want him dropping in coverage 100 times a season, but he can do it here and there. I'm sure he'll get better with time as well because he wasn't really asked to do it much in Georgia. So, I mean, the more he seems like a willing guy that's willing to learn and work at his craft. So as long as he wants to, I feel like he can develop and be a really good player for the Eagles. But regardless of his development or what happens with Haason Reddick, I feel like we will see the Eagles draft an edge rusher relatively high in the draft because there's a lot of talent there. There's all different kind of size, speed, whatever they're looking for, different pass rushing skill sets, dropping in coverage. Jonah Ellis is a guy that I really like. So, I mean, there's a ton of potential out there in the draft at edge rusher. The free agent class isn't the greatest, but the Eagles should be able to add some talent regardless of what happens with Haason Reddick and Nolan Smith.
As far as the breakdowns of, again, we talk about these different restructurings, contract, salary cap increase. So we're going to see deals get done in a couple weeks that are going to probably, I mean, just from the outside looking in without any context, will be shocking, right? The deals are going to be more because the increase in percentage. And I think a lot of people understand that. But is there even more of an importance to get a Smitty extension done now rather than wait? Because you look at some guys like a CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, resetting the market of sorts. That's what you're saying there, too, of Howie getting deals done, thinking ahead, doing it before maybe you would like to, because then all of a sudden you're like, oh, hey, look, that's a great deal. You even look at Jalen Hurts' contract. It's like, oh, wow, he's the highest paid, but that didn't last very long. And then it's just you kind of leapfrog one after the another. But that deal is going to look incredible in, maybe even after this season, but certainly after the next couple of years, it's going to be like, wow, okay, Jalen Hurts got him on a discount, honestly. How do you feel about Smitty? Is it the same type of scenario? Where are you at with that?
Well, I think I tweeted about it a week or so ago. I feel like that should be their number one priority, is getting that deal done. Because like you said, there are players that are even better than Smitty at receiver that are going to get paid. So I feel like to get ahead of that market, before it used to be just the quarterback market, that was like, oh, this guy got paid this much, I want $1 more, or I want whatever. It was always about beating the most recent contract. And now we're seeing that transition to every other position in the NFL. So I feel like it's so important to get DeVonta Smith locked in under contract. It seems like he wants to be here. So it shouldn't be a big problem to get it done. And it's just Amon-Ra St. Brown is another guy that's going to get paid soon as well. And there were already reports about him receiving $25 to $30 million a year on his extension or whatever the case might be. So it's really, really crucial to get DeVonta Smith under contract. Then I feel like their next step should be getting Landon Dickerson extended, and then they can worry about everything else. But I feel like taking care of Smith, taking care of Dickerson, and then moving forward should be their main priorities.
That's what I'm hopeful we get it done. I think everybody wants, again, Smitty to be here for life. He's the consummate professional. We appreciate him. We appreciate AJ, as opposed to what some of the media and everything else. We're not going to go there. But, hey, we love these guys. We want them to be here, lock them up long term. Curious to see what the contract will be. But, again, if anybody has not, go check out Anthony, Pro Football Network. Got the link in the description. Appreciate you coming on. Obviously, we'll do this quite a bit. But, as always, it's been a blast.
Thanks so much.